everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is Jake Madoff. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. How are you two doing?
Absolutely great. Glad to have you here. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why we're talking.
Sure. So I'm a full stack growth marketer. What that means is kind of a new AG marketing type term. It used to be growth hacker, and now the most sophisticated term is full stack growth marketer. A full stack growth marketer means that I cover paid search, paid social, CRO, and SEO. So paid social is basically ads on Facebook, Instagram, largely considered Meta, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc. Paid search, largely ads on Google. That includes Google Shopping, Google Performance Max, and then Bing. And then, of course, SEO. Most of what I do there is on-page SEO with a bit of off-page SEO work. And then CRO is basically anything involving conversion rate optimization. So optimizing a funnel for a given conversion, whether that's a purchase or a sale. That's kind of where I started. My start was with a iOS application that I co-founded called TradeMade. We got funding for that. I worked on it for about 2 or 3 years. It was a team of about 15 people. I was leading growth and product design there. So just as a way of survival for the company, I taught myself growth marketing. At that point, it was around 2015. SEO was kind of more of the name of the game. Paid social was just kind of starting, but things were more organic for social. There wasn't really that big a market yet for paid. It was really just kind of just starting with paid social. From there, I started working at Bespoke Post later on, led growth there for about 5 years. And when I started, it was me and one other person. We were spending about $300,000 a month on ads. By the time I left about 5 years later, it was a team of about 7 or 8, and we were spending about $2 million a month on ads. Wow. And all the while, I was doing freelance on the side and working with small and large brands from Hims and Hers to Hum Nutrition to Home Chef, to smaller kind of more local businesses or smaller, small to medium-sized business owners, and helping them and bringing that kind of like enterprise level expertise where I've done tons of testing and bringing that to them and helping them with their growth and digital marketing.
Yeah, that's awesome. that you call yourself a full stack guy, because in software, full stack's front end and back end, but in your world, it's kind of everything. It's the same kind of concept, but it's an interesting term to use in this application. And another thing that's interesting is some of those brands that you mentioned. I've seen ads multiple times. Just going through my own social media or whatever, I've seen ads for all that stuff, and so it's cool to be talking with the guy that's kind of responsible for that. So
I was going to say it's even worse on our end because I was a subscriber to Bespoke Post and to Threadbeast and to Home Chef. So there's a number of brands that you've worked on that you got me.
No kidding. You're Threadbeast too?
We did Threadbeast for a little bit. My son was using it as a way to augment his fashion catalog. And then we're actually currently Home Chef customers, so we still use Home Chef.
That's wild.
But yeah, so kind of fun that you've actually touched several of these brands we've worked on. So actually we'll probably have some insights into the kind of marketing they're doing. Sure. Of course, I don't know if you're still involved with those guys, but we definitely blame you for the past.
Yeah.
So cool. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to ask, I haven't worked on a campaign where I had a budget, that was even significant enough to make a dent into any kind of, $300,000 budget's one thing, but a $2 or $3 million budget's another. Can you maybe talk about how having the dollars to spend on a campaign makes a difference in the results versus, throwing $500 here, $1,000 there?
Great question. Yeah. I mean, it's a core difference. And oftentimes when I'm asked questions around strategy or testing, it always is dependent upon your budget. So the biggest difference when you have a big budget is, you start to hit a plateau. So the evolution kind of looks like, if you imagine it in brackets, where in my freelance role, majority of the time, the budgets are between 5 and 50,000 a month in paid media. With that kind of spend, you're typically running on maybe 2 channels, primarily Meta and Google, and you can do some testing at the creative and audience level. Maybe testing 4 to 5 concepts a month and 2 or 3 audiences per month. At that second level, which is more the part-time freelance work I do, more of the contract work I do, maybe that's between, let's say, 50 and 200,000 a month in ad spend. There you can start to pull in additional channels. You can really start to test on YouTube. You can start to pull in maybe TikTok or Snapchat. You can really start to scale your budget even further, and you're allowed multivariate testing, where you can do significant concept testing, more than 3 or 4 concepts. You can test like 8 or 10 concepts in a given month. So you have that kind of evolution and growth from a testing and channel scalability standpoint. When you head into like the enterprise level, where it's like 1 million a month plus in ad spend, there you can start to get really fun with adding in channels like podcasts, influencer marketing, local television, programmatic. There you're not really testing anymore. You're still kind of doing that. You're testing, still a similar amount, but you're just refreshing your creative a lot more often, because typically bigger budgets mean a bigger team. You can just run a ton of creative. So we were launching, probably 20 ads a week with Bespoke Post. I mean, at peak, it was a lot of volume that we were running across the different channels. Yeah.
Okay. So then with that in mind, I mean, for your smaller guys, your, sub $5,000 price point, I mean, is social and that kind of stuff even worth it today? So, in the past, there used to be a lot of, organic things you could do and hashtags and things like that. But I mean, is there a clear path, or is that, is money maybe better spent elsewhere, until you sort of achieve a certain level?
Yeah. Under the 5K, which happens, that's definitely not a rarity. Usually I'll start with one channel. I'll either pick Meta or Google based on what the business is. So like for e-commerce, let's say a lower ticket e-commerce product, like maybe more of a conspicuous purchase, imagine an accessory, or like one of those one-use kitchen gadgets, those types of products like apparel and accessory. You'll probably get more success with Meta at like that $3K a month in budget. And then you can start to scale. Hopefully by month 2 or 3, our ROAS is profitable. It's above a 3 ROAS. You can start to scale that up to maybe now we can spend $5K a month and add in an additional channel and start testing. So I'd say just with a smaller, maybe a couple thousand a month, it's just better to run on one channel, and then maybe introduce another one when you start to get a bit more data and become profitable. But that's typically what that evolution looks like.
Well, I think that's good advice, because I think for a lot of people, especially small business owners, they have this pressure that is just, we should be on social media and it's free. So let's use every platform and let's publish the same content everywhere. And let's find some tool that'll allow us to do all that. And then what ends up happening is they're so distributed across all these different platforms that basically there's no time to do anything. And so they end up just publishing nonsense, or it's, it's not really doing anything for them. If anything, it might be bad for them. And so even the concept of narrowing to one, I think, is actually, even though it sounds very simple, I think it's actually kind of a foreign idea, to I guess what we would call sort of an unsophisticated marketer, right? Maybe a small business owner trying to do it on their own. And so I wonder if you could just talk briefly. I mean, I think we all have some generalization in our mind of what the different networks might be for. You sort of pointed out a use case where you might use Google over Meta, for example. But like, where's the most bang for our buck today? You always hear questions about, algorithm and, how you can sort of take advantage of different, whatever's new or new features or whatever that are rolling out. Today we've got to use Instagram stories. Tomorrow we got to use whatever. Is there a path for the do-it-yourselfer who just wants to try and do it cheap? Like, can you still be found if you're not, I don't know, supporting your OnlyFans or something? Is there a way to get popular on social media without paying for it?
Yeah. If you're taking, with respect to the paid approach where you're running ads on Google or Meta, generally speaking, if you're an e-commerce company, you're probably going to have better success on Meta. If you're a service company, you're probably going to have better success on Google. Reason being is it's just easier to target someone who's in market for your service, whether you're a web development agency, you're a financial service provider, whatever it is. It's going to be a bit better performance on Google for service-based businesses and a little bit better on Meta for e-commerce based. That's also because with Meta, you have more of a canvas for ad creative. That's a big difference between Google search and Meta. Is with Meta, you can really have fun with video creative and image creative. And that lends itself better to e-commerce products that require a bit more visual, where a service industry, you can get away with kind of more text heavy advertising to communicate your service. Of course, Google has things like YouTube and PMax. Performance Max is one that runs across several networks like Gmail, Discovery, Display, etc. But organically, I'd say it's always tough to grow organically on social media. Your best options to grow organically are Instagram and TikTok, and now YouTube Shorts. I'd say it was much harder to grow on YouTube before YouTube Shorts. That has become a lot easier. Where I'm seeing brands scale from five. Let's say they were getting around 5 to 7K subscribers. They were getting to now 50K in a few months because they're just cutting up a video into shorts and then running that. And then it's such an easy click now to subscribe to a YouTube channel, whereas before it was a bit more of a lift for a user to do that. But now with shorts, it's basically TikTokified the YouTube.
Right. So do you think, in your opinion, and I don't know that there is a straight answer to this. I know Mike had an experience with it that was kind of funny, which is people using TikTok for TikTok's sake and stuff like that. So as you're advertising or, I guess helping companies strategize on how to move forward in growth, do you give them recommendations like, hey, keep up on the TikTok dances and make sure you're doing that retarded thing, even if you're the credit union down the block or something? And, even if it's not relevant, does it make sense just to engage in those different platforms? Or is it better, use at your own risk, or you need to be more strategic about the way we're thinking? Is it okay to just have fun?
I'm more the latter approach, where I'm going to be more tailored in my approach, where if I'm working with an asset manager or financial services company, TikTok probably isn't going to be the right place. You're not going to need to go hard on doing native TikTok content to launching dances or lip syncs. That's not really going to work. Even from paid, I wouldn't do it. If you have, the kind of prototypical example, if you have an intern, a Gen Z intern that can, produce some content, it couldn't hurt your brand if they're a good content creator, but it's not going to be something that it's going to be kind of a lower priority item that I launch with, for sure.
So, in software, we do testing all the time as far as to make sure that if you change something, you don't break it. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned testing in your initial intro. Can you maybe talk about how you test an ad campaign and how it works on different platforms? I'm sure you change it up just a little bit on one, and then you see if it affects the end result. Is that pretty much the concept, or is there? I'm sure it's a lot more in depth than what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the tests between audience targeting and creative are a bit different. So with audience targeting, you always want to start with a broad baseline audience. So let's say I'm marketing a shoe company, let's say Zappos, for example. I'll want to start with a broad target, or maybe I'm just doing national targeting across the US and I'm doing ages 21 to 64 or something. That'll be my control variation in my test. Then I'll launch additional audiences against that, like an interest, maybe someone who interested in shoes or someone interested in generally fashion. Launch lookalike audiences. So building an audience that targets people that look like your past customers. That's another targeting option that Meta offers. And I'll run that for a while, given, if you spend more, you can get those learnings much faster. If you spend less, it takes longer to get that data in. But then you're constantly refreshing and trying different audiences and slices. And you'll probably settle eventually with a particular audience that works. One example that has been very fruitful that we found during our time of testing at Bespoke Post, and now is almost becoming somewhat of a common practice whenever a brand wants to try and target higher quality customers. oftentimes when I come in and I work with an e-commerce company or even a service-based company, they'll say, we're getting leads, but they're just not high enough quality. Or we're getting purchases, but we need the AOV to be higher. Something you can do there is actually build a lookalike audience on your Amex users. So what we often find is customers that own an American Express card typically have a higher LTV and AOV. So actually just slicing your customer list and just taking your American Express users and then building a lookalike on those users will help increase your AOV and LTV.
Can you break down those acronyms?
Yes, for sure. AOV, average order value. So basically the average value of a purchase, and then LTV is lifetime value. So what is like over time? If you're a subscription box company like Spoke Post or Home Chef, for example, if Ryan cancels 2 months in, that's going to be a lower LTV than someone that cancels after 8 months. And then we're going to want to target more people like, the one that stays for 8 months or something. Creative testing is very different. There, you can really experiment with concepts. I always like to do kind of more of a 70-30 approach where 70% of my creatives are iterations on my top performers. So let's say with shoes, let's say I know that there's this particular brand of, when I put this in, like if there's a particular brand of Nike or a particular model of Nike, I put in this ad with a purple color, it's going to perform well. And I iterate on that concept. I usually like doing if we have 10 new ads, I'll do 7 that are iterations and then 3 that are totally new concepts we've never tried before. And what that allows for is sometimes I'll come in to a brand and they're launching totally new concepts every month. And what that does is adds a lot of volatility because you're not really learning from any of the past history that you're doing and iterating on a top performer.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, actually, because I think for a lot of people that get tired of their social media, at least this is something that we've seen in our clients, is they get tired of what they're doing because they of course are bombarded with it. Meanwhile, the greater world has not seen their creative or has not seen their ads or whatever, and we've got a lot of testing and waiting and stuff to do. But it is really hard sometimes to talk clients back and say, no, you've got to let this ride for a little bit, especially if they're dumping a lot of money into it and they're uncertain about how it's performing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Setting expectations primarily that the first 30 days, if you're a brand new account, is going to look rough and volatile, and that you shouldn't make any conclusions on the first 30 days of data with a standard kind of small to medium budget. It's going to be very hard to make conclusions that you can replicate in those first 30 days. So I always set that expectation, because if a client's looking to come in and reach profitability in week 2 with a small budget, it's just not going to happen. Yeah.
What kind of metrics and data are you paying attention to? Do you have is there an application that you use that kind of consolidates all of it into one, or do you just go off of the dashboards that are provided to you by each, if it's Meta or if it's YouTube or whatever? Do you have any tools that you use particularly to track things?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say for small business owners, with that, couple thousand budget on under 5K or between 2 and 10K, you're probably just better off using the native reporting in the app platform. But I do prefer when you start to really scale, like a tool like Northbeam. I've been really liking that tool for attribution. They have different attribution models that are very easy to toggle between, and they import your data very seamlessly between the different channels. So I've been really liking that tool.
So as an extension of that question, then maybe you can help me with this. I think we're starting to evolve past this, generally speaking. But there was a period of time where we were on social for social's sake. We all hired a 17-year-old and that person put us on Twitter and we were stoked.
Right.
And but one of the big things that started to come is the business people who were paying attention to business started to look at their ROI, right? And like you mentioned, there's some expectation setting here that we need to talk about, which is, how much time you should really be putting into this. And I've had a number of clients, I'm sure you've seen them too, that come to you. They don't really have a long-term budget, but they're like, I want to throw $5,000 at this. Can I do it, this month or whatever? I have, that's it, $5,000. And it's like, and so they have this skewed expectation that just by virtue of being on the internet that they are going to be seen or something like that. So I wonder if you could talk about, either specific KPIs that you can tell people about or show people to sort of illustrate a return on investment, even if you can't necessarily tie dollar for dollar, or if there's a way that you're able to show an ROI or basically show effectiveness without, really having the goods to show it just yet.
Yeah, great question. So a few things on this. For click-based tracking, that's obviously easier to track. A user clicks on an ad, they come to your site. When they come to your site, they're cookied, and you can use even UTM tracking for that. You have it because they landed on your page, your link that they click through had a UTM, you can track that user more easily. For anything other than more click-based attribution, what's generally called like view attribution or view through attribution. Someone sees your ad on Meta, they don't click your ad, but they're like, "Oh, cool! That was a cool pair of shoes," or that was a really interesting ad about this financial service, whatever it was. And then they go to your site and Google you directly, and then they convert through a Google search. Meta may not take credit for that, but Google will, and the client may say, "Hey, we're spending on Meta, but Meta isn't showing any conversions. What's going on here?" The recourse to that is you could look at things like branded search. Ostensibly, if you weren't running ads before and then you just started running ads at 5K a month in spend, you should start to see branded search increase. And you can measure your branded search in Google Search Console. You can see, okay, are more people searching for Zappos? And if that's so versus the previous 3 months, that's clearly ads helping with that. Another thing is adding to your flow, whether it's a contact form or a checkout flow, adding something like, "How did you hear about us?" That's a very low lift, low effort way to capture that view through, to say, "Oh, okay, people are submitting that they heard about us on Meta, but they're not clicking through from Meta." So that's another great touch point. And then lastly, for larger campaigns, I did one campaign for A24. It was that movie studio. I was subcontracted through an agency. You can do like retrospectives and multi-media reporting where you can either send emails out or surveys to customers or purchases, ask them questions to acquire learnings. So there are a few more of those qualitative ways to capture. If you have a software attribution tool, that of course helps and solves a lot of this. But for those smaller businesses, like in that example you gave, the adding in that question in the form or just measuring branded search is kind of a nice low lift option.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone to Google and didn't know if it was a .com or a .io or .info right. or whatever the actual, and I just type it in, their name, and then go to the first sponsored search and it comes up. And I wonder how many times that happens and it just eats through their ad budget of people just, I don't know what the actual .com is, but I'm just going to Google it and then Google's going to take the credit for it. And so I kind of feel bad when I do that actually, because I'm like, oh, I just ruined it. But you know what I mean?
It happens. I mean, and also it's important now because brands are so omnipresent, and sometimes like at Bespoke Post, we had like our catchphrase "Box of Awesome" because people had a lot of difficulty spelling Bespoke Post. So sure. We have Box of Awesome. So like a lot of brands have like taglines or their brand name is different from their URL. So whenever you're running Google Ads, it's important to bid on all those variations, like bid on your tagline, bid on your domain name, bid on your company name, even bid on your team member's name. That's like another thing that I do sometimes when they come in is like I'll bid on the founder's name or relevant team members.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of people doing that before. That's a smart idea, I think, especially if you have a prominent leader or something who's known in their space or something right. like that. That makes a lot of sense. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, or one of the things I was curious about, I just was thinking about it because of what Mike said, even though this isn't what he said, but it spurred this thought in my head, which is like for people who are trying to do individual posts like this, like you always see like in Facebook and in Instagram, you've got this concept of boosting posts. And so I think for a lot of small businesses that maybe don't retain an agency or don't have somebody on speed dial, they can call for social help. They just, might be boosting their posts and doing things like that. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? Is that an effective way to spend $20, or is it just basically kind of throwing money at the lottery and, maybe you'll get a hit, maybe you won't?
Definitely more the latter. Yeah. Any kind of more direct response growth marketer like myself will tell you boosted posts are like Facebook's way of like a gumball machine that is broken. Like, you put in like $20 and you're like, oh, I'm excited to get some return. And then it's like, it gives you like, a gumball that's 2 years stale. Like it's boosted posts. If you throw $20, $50 at it, it's going to cycle through your followers first, and then it'll start to expand very broadly. So it's really not going to do much. I mean, it's also typically going to optimize for like traffic or impressions. So it's you're better off honestly just saving that, and then saving up a few $50 increments over time, and then just bringing on a growth marketer to help scale. Yeah.
So Google used to, SEO was a big thing, and typing out your blog posts daily and trying to get those SEO metrics up. Is that still a thing, or is it all pretty much give me your money and we're going to place you higher kind of? Is there tactics still behind SEO? And actually, because if I Google my DJ name, there's a golf company that makes putters that's on Tick. And everything that I'll see a post of mine, and then I'll see a putter, and then I'll see another. Even though it has DJ in front of it, I'm still seeing putters, and I'm seeing random stuff. That there's an aeronautics company as well that shows up. They make propellers, and so it's like, if I were trying to compete with a putter and an airplane manufacturer as a DJ, how would I maybe go about trying to get my SEO to pop up more in the DJ world instead of having these guys pop up as well?
Yeah. SEO is going through a very interesting change right now. So like you're describing, let's say maybe even like up until even 5 years ago, like just before COVID, let's say 2018 and before, 2019 and before, SEO should be part of your acquisition strategy if you're e-commerce or service. One of my first websites that I built was called Bestly, Best LYY. It's still live. And I was competing with this company that was called at the time bestproducts.com. And that was, of course, an SEO play. I named my site Bestly. It was like bestlyco.products or something. And then bestproducts.com. Bestproducts.com was later bought by Hearst Publishing. And I was competing with them on terms like best indoor treadmill, like best, organic toothpaste, and like driving to Amazon as an Amazon associate and collecting affiliate revenue. And SEO back then, 7 years ago or so, was awesome. It was like you really could be very formulaic and scientific and rank for terms if you knew what you were doing and actually monetize on that. Today, it's very different. If you're an e-commerce company and you're doing SEO, it's a losing battle. Like if you Google, like as just a fun experiment, Google like leather men's shoe, and then like as a product search, and then Google something like web development agency. The two searches are totally different. Google's feed for anything product related is they're just going to show you tons of product tiles from their Google shopping feed. So like your whole SERP is going to look like product tiles. All that's sponsored. Those are ads. That's not SEO. That's their Google shopping feed. For a service, it'll still look pretty normal. It'll look like you'll see some sponsored listings for development agencies. You'll see a few listicle sites like Clutch or something that rank agencies, and maybe a few agencies that have good SEO will come up there. So if you're an e-commerce brand, search is going to fall by the wayside, and Google's very much turning into just like a front page catalog now. For services, you can still kind of get away with that blog approach that you're describing, where publish an article that's like best web development agencies in New York and try and rank for that, or best, the more specific, the better. So if you're for a web development agency that I worked with a few years ago, we went very specific. We were like the best, Java web development agency in New York. Like we went very specific, like to the language level for people looking for like a particular programming language. But even what I'm saying now, it's probably going to feel pretty vintage in like a year or two with ChatGPT, and search like changing quite a bit of even how they show like other service-based or like informational searches.
Yeah, that actually takes me into what I wanted to get into next was sort of the effect of AI on stuff. I think a lot of people are, leveraging tools like ChatGPT and others for, content creation and quickly iterating on blog posts and, all kinds of things, tweets, everything. Mm-hmm. And so for me, at least like as a human being, I go, okay, well, you're kind of cheapening this information. It still might be good, but like somehow it feels less valuable to me because now it's just, can be churned out by a machine, at rapid pace. So I've heard, and I don't know, so I'm open to clarity on this one, is like I've heard, that Google and other platforms are looking at ways to sort of scrub out or de-rank, content that's obviously created by AI. I don't know if that's the case. And then I also don't know, how they would even know in some cases. And so I wonder if you had any insights on just sort of, maybe it's more of a global landscape of what, marketing might look like in the future, given, the influx of AI-based content that's coming in.
Well, and a good example of that is actually our podcast. Ryan used to type out a long form intro and have everything kind of dialed in for each guest. And he's a little too busy to do that now. And so we're actually using AI to do that for us. And it would be interesting to see if it actually affects our numbers.
Yeah, I was scared when you said you're using it. I thought you were going to tell me you two are both AI renderings right now that I was speaking.
Yeah, we actually are both bots. Yeah,
don't worry about that. We're good.
Yeah, we're in the Caribbean right now. I don't know where you are.
But. We're just brains existing in the ether talking to each other. It's I do think digital marketing is going to change pretty significantly over like the next 5 years. Like within the actual app platforms, you're seeing now more like tooltips that come up where, Google is like, hey, try our AI beta to write your ad copy, or Meta's like, try our AI beta to iterate on some of your ads. Google actually now, when you build a display campaigns are like all those side widgets that you see next to like a CNN article or New York Times. It's like all those little widgets. They actually have now in their library, when you're going to select your media, they say AI generated media that's similar to that on your website. So like they will when you put in your URL, they crawl your URL and then they start generating AI content that you can easily select from. So That is pretty wild. That's less than 2 months old. Like that's a very new feature.
Have you tried it?
I have not. No.
It'd be interesting to see if there's a way for them to tell, like, oh, we generated this, so we're going to push it a little bit. Because, a lot of the new, like the YouTube Shorts, for example, like they were pushed a lot heavier when it was brand new because it's new tech. And I've heard that if you always go with the new and latest, greatest, your numbers are going to do better. It'd be interesting to see if their AI generated content would be preferred.
Yeah.
I don't know, Yeah.
From a search standpoint, it does see. I haven't actually seen a report on this yet, maybe because it's just too early. But I am finding it is harder to rank for blog posts that are like 90% plus generated by ChatGPT. Like at this point, I've worked with a few companies where usually they're outsourcing their content, and then I can tell who they're outsourcing it to is using ChatGPT.
Sure.
Google can probably detect some of that now as AI gets more sophisticated into more like AGI, more artificial general intelligence, where it's indistinguishable. That will probably be very difficult, and everything will just become blurred. And I don't think search engine will be able to do that. But as of right now, I wouldn't be surprised if there is something that is at least deprioritizing what is registered as AI content in the search.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that like Meta and Google are actually, inviting people or encouraging people even to use these AI tools. I mean, it seems to me that the long run on AI stuff like that, AI marketing, AI advertising is basically a general cheapening of everything. Like all of a sudden ads aren't worth anything because they're just garbage spewed by the internet. And so in terms of, at least now, to some degree, maybe less now than 5 years ago, but, you still have to be clever. You have to come up with something interesting. You have to be compelling. You have, there's like all these things. But when everything is so hyper optimized all the time at such an automatic level, it'll be so easy to churn out stuff that the volume of things that are going to be available to you is going to be so huge that it seems to me that you're just going to get to a place where there's just nothing but noise left. And then when advertisers have to compete basically on the dollars, which is, hey, I can pay more than you. I mean, there's going to be a diminishing return there too, where I'm not actually getting enough more sales to justify this giant budget. And, like it just seems to me that they might end up kind of killing their own industry unbeknownst to them, by just creating a wasteland of just whatever AI generated content.
I think that is a total possibility. And put differently, I think we're going to get to a point where your devices are so saturated with content where brands are going to need to spend so much to be omnipresent. Because if you're just running on one thing or doing on one channel, like you're going to fall away very quickly because everyone else is just producing AI content across like every channel. So it's going to put a premium on spending even more, which is going to make it even harder for brands to be profitable. And therefore they'll turn to another option.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and I heard somebody talking the other day, or they posited this idea about, a future Netflix where, eventually your system knows so much about you that it starts to just generate content for you. So instead of tuning into, I don't know, Blue Bloods or whatever you like to watch, it's generating The Ryan Show. And every day I have a new episode of The Ryan Show I can sit down and watch, and my favorite actors are doing these things. But it's like so much of life, or what makes life interesting, is novelty. And I think if we get to a point where our AI overlords are just feeding us something that they believe is what we need indefinitely, I think we'll actually lose value in those things too. Like we're just going to care less because, I can just have the Ryan Show anytime. So like, who cares? It's not like, I have to wait 2 weeks for the next Game of Thrones, or I have to wait, it's like all of a sudden it's going to be, I can get this big epic, high budget TV show delivered to my house every week or every day. And, I don't know, it's like kind of like everything, right? I mean, the car your parents give you, you don't take as good a care of as the car you bought yourself. So it's like when everything is kind of cheap and free, kind of feels like nothing will be valuable anymore.
Yeah. I really used to enjoy when everybody experienced, the cultural zeitgeist at the same time. Like when Game of Thrones was on, it was great that we were all talking about Game of Thrones every Monday.
Yeah.
In the office.
We used to Lost. I don't know if you remember Lost back in the day when that was out. We used to have viewing parties and people come over and watch it together. And now it's like you avoid
that's
people
the thing.
in general.
If it's the Mike Show and it's just night court with DJs instead, it's like I don't know how compelling that's going to be to you, Jake, or like I may not care either, and so I can't go to Mike's house and watch TV because his show's stupid, and so it's like, so what are we going to do? It's like, so I think that despite the amazing things that AI can do, I think there is a little bit of like, I don't know, cutting off our nose to spite our face that I think's going on, and we're not paying attention because it's such new novel technology. Just going, okay, well, just use it. And like I'm seeing it injected in every software platform, everywhere. And it's like, even if it doesn't really do anything, like all it does is it's maybe a more robust search of your platform or something. It's like, it doesn't really do anything. It just kind of does what I did before in a slicker way.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, so I can already see a diminishing return on the novelty of AI. And I see from like a marketing or an advertising perspective that while I can see in the short term it comes in and it replaces a bunch of designers and it replaces a bunch of ad guys, I can see a world where the companies who end up being successful are the ones that are relying back on human creative to create something new and novel that AI can't see yet. Maybe one day we'll all be, AI will be our overlord and we won't have even a place for creative people like that anymore. But I think there's always going to be a spot for people who can sort of flex a creative muscle. And maybe I'm naive, but I believe that there's still going to be a place for that.
I agree. I was happy with like, the Writers Guild and SAG movements where, actors and actresses were against basically their avatars being licensed for AI use. Cause it's true. It's like, I don't think a lot of people like, even myself, I use it every now and then for ad campaigns, but even myself, when I'm using it, I'm like, I wouldn't be too sad if this wasn't a thing in a few years because I'm scared of this in 5 years. It's nice right now, but I use it with that thought in the back of my mind. Did you see OpenAI's new product, the AI Sora? It was
the video generation tool.
It was the video generation. Yeah.
It's insane.
That was genuinely terrifying to me when I saw that trailer for that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, to kind of what we're talking about here. I mean, not only is it, yes, it could be useful in marketing, or somebody that has a small budget, maybe they could produce a video for less money, or whatever. But it's but there's also danger. Like you mentioned, the SAG-AFTRA guys, avatars being used in marketing and advertising. I mean, obviously, there's already hundreds of thousands of millions of cases of these, celebrities being injected into all kinds of things and selling products they've never heard of. And all these things are already happening. And it's just imagine when it's indistinguishable from reality, when all of a sudden, you're seeing a video trending on social media that's, I don't know, your nation's president saying something insane that, is going to put people in real danger or something. And it's okay, well, is it real? Isn't it real? We don't know. Do we act on it? Don't we? It's, it's Scott, we're going to end up in a real pickle.
Scott Galloway was talking about this the other day in regards to even this upcoming election and the perception that I try to avoid politics in this, but one of the things that everyone's saying is Biden's old and that he's slow and his cognitive abilities are slowing down, and that he's talking about not necessarily AI making a video of him, obviously having issues, but just slowing him down a little bit, making it look like he's cognitively impaired and putting pauses where there shouldn't be and stuff like that. And it's crazy to think of how that can have an effect on just elections in general. And do you know who Rick Beto is? Have you ever heard of him? He's a producer and has a YouTube channel and talks about recording music and trends in music and stuff like that. And he was talking the other day that, hip hop was huge back in the day. Pop was huge back in the day. Everything that was kind of the last decade or so that was mainstream music isn't charting as much anymore, because what it actually is charting is live musicians playing an instrument, actual guitar players shredding on a guitar, drummers doing these sick fills and stuff that AI can't replicate. It's kind of coming back in the mainstream because it's so rare to see a band that actually has talent these days that isn't produced in a studio, and to actually be able to go to a live show and see them just kill it I went to a show the other day that, they're playing like Hendrix and stuff like that and actually sounding like Hendrix. And it's so refreshing to get that kind of music back in the mainstream, to where it was kind of lost for a second. And I think it has a direct correlation to this AI generating everything, and it's all the same 4 chords and the same stuff that's been trending for the last 20 years, because it was put in there by the same producers of the same Nickelbacks and that genre of music, trying to sound like the same trending person. And so I think that the creative element, the live DJ versus the hit the sync button and let it do it for you DJ is kind of there's a longing for it. And I think creatives, whether it's graphic designers or YouTube's, whatever it is, I think the human element is key. And even though the AI is there, I don't think it's ever going to go away, where the human presence, the person playing guitar in front of you, is important. Yeah. And I think it's coming back, which is very refreshing.
It's funny, or what's interesting about what you're saying, and there's a couple things. First of all, I agree with what you're saying about Nickelback, but I did see them live once, and they're tremendous live. So, but I will also say this, that I spent a lot of time talking about that.
I had a request for Creed the other day, and I just couldn't do it.
But I will say, so the thing with Nickelback, because I'm that guy, I'd be like, this is just radio garbage. This is, it's stupid pop rock, whatever. But then seeing them perform it was, lights out. They played amazing. They sound awesome. Everything was really good. So, but what's interesting, or I think the case that you're making there, is the spiffed up radio version, or in this marketing discussion, the GPT version of a slick marketing piece doesn't have the same oomph, or the same whatever this intangible thing is that, Nickelback Live has. Nickelback Live versus Nickelback Radio aren't even comparable. You know what I mean? And so it's the same song, but you can actually start to feel soul and feel things that get communicated just by way of sound waves and stuff like that you don't get in a slick radio piece. And so I think your point about there being some longing for reality is gonna always be there. And I wrote about this years ago, and I talked about technological saturation, which is basically you were seeing an increase in beard oils and craft beers and things like that. And it was all around this movement of people who were looking for real life things to touch and feel. Because for us in our generation, things got real techie, real fast, and everything was being done on our phone. And you don't even touch a real button, you touch pictures of buttons and that kind of thing, So we started to replace reality with this, virtual reality, so to speak. And then, we start looking for real things. Look, record players are selling like crazy nowadays, and everybody's putting out all their new albums. I just bought the new Kanye album on vinyl. It's like, but this is what people are doing.
The funny part about that, Ryan, is that there's actually been studies on the vinyl that people that have large record collections, 70 to 80% of them don't even have a record player.
Oh, how funny. I was going to say, you're just going to say something nice about people with records because you have 10,000 of them on the wall. But
I thought you were setting up a joke there. Yeah, I thought a joke was coming.
I figured he was going to put himself over somehow. But the point is, and I think it's the point you were making, Mike, is that, there is a sort of analog connection to life that I think is really important. And so as you're seeing, the novelty of ChatGPT and these things, it is going to burn hot and fast for a little while. Like, I think it is going to be that. But I think eventually there's going to be a thing where you're going to want human touch again, where, right now we'll play with these new things and, hey, yeah, it's passable copy and all that stuff. But we'll start to see, I think, as we get trained more and more on AI, we'll start to see a real delineation between AI Picasso and real Picasso, right? Yes, I can make a thing in DALL-E that looks like, a Picasso piece. But what I really needed was a dark maniac with mental issues and all this stuff. Like, that's how you get a real Picasso, right? And so, and I think that there's just going to always be a difference like that. So whether it comes down to, advertising and marketing and hiring a designer to do your piece, or letting, AI generate something for you that's passable, I think the people who care the most about their marketing budget and care the most about their product and care the most about their people will always have sort of a need for human touch, whatever that means.
I agree. I think there will be a premium on the physical, 10 years from now, let's say 5 or 10 years. And what's really fascinating too, where, some of the motifs we're talking about are a swing back to what was analog, or a swing back to what was, more real in a way. A version of that in marketing could be, things like out of home marketing or physical marketing could now come back into vogue, like more things that are, physical installations or events, or things that now are seen as potentially not as high returning, but there could be a return to more kind of physical experiences that are used for marketing versus digital, because that's the only way, or the best way 5 years from now, to make an impression, is to do something.
And I think what they'll find is, I can't remember, is it Steven Pinker that has the idea of the 1,000 true fans? And so, and the concept being that you really only need 1,000 people who will buy every living thing you put out, that, to make all the money you ever need to make. If you want to start a business, you want to start a band, whatever, you just really need that 1,000 true fans. And I think that concept is right. And maybe kind of what you're talking about here is that, when you live in a world where every billboard is digital and there's 75 ads being run every hour, and you're only going to get so much affinity for brands on those kinds of boards. The company that decides to put together the cool party in the Hollywood Hills, or the cool party in New York City that only 500 people get to go to, and, there's some exclusivity around things. And the amount of affinity you would build hosting an event like that, even if it was just for that 1,000 true people who show up to your thing in New York City, that $1,000 probably goes further than hitting 100,000 people with your billboard twice a day, or with your social media post, or whatever, So, it's I think people will start to find, and this is probably true today too, is that you could probably do a lot more. I think people feel like they're doing more if they're reaching more eyeballs, but I think the reality is you could be more effective with fewer eyeballs and actually get further.
Yeah.
Who's the guy? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a quick note on that. I have a pretty crazy projection, or speculation of where advertising could go that's almost Black Mirror-ish, where I think like the next potential canvas that's not digital that advertisers could try and take over is the sky in a more meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine like projections or more intricate ways to like form clouds that make a brand name, or
people have been trying to put lasers on the moon for years.
Right. Like imagine like just looking up and seeing like in the same way where you have light pollution from like, billboards in Times Square, like imagine that is more resonant and a bit more, clear, where you're literally looking up at a given area and you see like a drone configuration of a brand name that just, they bought that ad space for a month to leave their drones configured in that way, And then
that's so crazy.
I was having this conversation with a friend, which is pretty wild, but like imagine rent is becoming very expensive. The cost of living is becoming very high, the price of houses, rent, et cetera. Imagine this is definitely, the end times here, but imagine as a way to subsidize your rent, you could opt into living in an apartment complex where a portion of your walls have ongoing ads that are just displayed all the time. You get a discount on your rent because you're watching ads, and that's the only thing that you have as an option. But there's ads running constantly in your background and like you're in your apartment. It's kind of like a fun thing to speculate on, but who the hell knows? Who knows?
It even occurred to me when you were starting to say, that it could be very Black Mirror-ish. I'm thinking even further into like the Neuralink type things where, you're just getting something beamed into your brain where you happen to look at that Volvo on the street and it's like, oh, buy this Volvo for X number of dollars. And it's literally just in your periphery because you're getting it through some sort of neural feed, because we've further integrated with technology. So, I think there's a lot of scary ways, and I do not put it past advertisers to stick their brand on just about anything. So
I had an ad on my Instagram feed that I was seeing consistently every day for probably the last 10, 15 days, and I didn't even know it was an ad. I thought it was it starts with this girl in front kind of thing, and she's always wearing the same shirt. I'm like, why am I seeing this same lady every time I'm on Instagram? And then I looked in the bottom. I actually stopped for a second because like, why am I seeing this every time? And then I realized it was an ad. I was literally scrolling through it every time, and you kind of become numb to it, and part of I'm kind of anti that, I pay for the ad-free version of Netflix, and when Amazon Prime started trying to charge me $3 to have ad-free content, I don't use Amazon Prime anymore. And it's just one of those things. I'm kind of like, I guess I'm just an old get off my lawn kind of guy, but I just don't like, like when I go visit my dad and he's got satellite TV, I only watch stuff that's with him that's pre-recorded because I can't sit through an ad break, and I don't watch the Super Bowl because it's a giant ad.
It's all about the commercials, though.
Yeah, but no, you know what I mean. It's getting to a point where it's so saturated that billboard on the side of the street doesn't mean anything anymore. By the time I drove past one the other day, and I pay attention to it a little bit because of Ryan and our podcast, and we talk about advertising a lot. And I drove by this billboard the other day, and I couldn't even tell. I could tell what the subject was, like what they were trying to sell, but I didn't see the company name anywhere on the ad. It's like going to putting a concert poster out there without saying the venue or the start time. It's just the lack of thought process in the billboard itself was just mind-boggling to me. Like, you got a tenth of a second to capture someone's attention driving down the road, and okay, yeah, I need a new roof, but who's going to do it for me? You didn't put your even logo anywhere where I could see it.
Maybe this will be the strength of AI then. It'll come in and also put out of business bad ad designers. So we'll all end up in a better spot, and we'll all bow to the GPT lords. So
tangent over.
So here we've only got a few minutes left, Jake, but I wondered if we could do or kind of part on I don't know, something that is kind of a leave behind or something actionable that people listening to the show could do. And we've touched on pieces and parts of this, but maybe if we can say it maybe a little bit more succinctly or sort of get, as close to a strategy out as we can here in the next 5 or 10. how would you, like, if you were being asked to advise, somebody is small to mid-sized business, maybe maybe we're talking, just for simplicity's sake, it's that $5,000 a month customer. And how do you advise somebody like that to basically do the most with the least?
I would say pick, let's say e-commerce company or service company,
sure.
for example.
Yeah.
Pick one channel. Let's say that's Google, and run on Google Shopping and Performance Max. Take your meta budget, put that into some retargeting. So you're just retargeting users, keeping yourself omnipresent. I would potentially check on like Upwork or Fiverr, get someone that can help create some creative pretty quickly for you. I think you can leverage ChatGPT for ad copy and try with that. And test for 30 days and see what you can do. In your campaign build, just test two things. Don't do like a multivariate split test. Just have your control of what your kind of true blue audience segment or creative that you think will work, and then test it against one other type of concept. Just let that run. Don't touch it too much in the first few weeks. Let that run and see what you get from a performance standpoint. Of course, there's a lot more intricacy in there. Of course, I'd recommend working with a growth marketer like myself, but at that lowest kind of action plan, I think that's what that could look like for a small business owner that wants to kind of be more a bit DIY with it.
Is that $5,000 budget within your range of service, or is that a little low for what you? Okay.
Yeah, and I typically scale with that. We're usually not at that 3 to 5K for long. Usually around that 3 month period, we can get a bit higher than that. And speaking of, I just looked at the time. I do have to jump on a 2 o'clock, but believe it or not, where I will be discussing ads. So
yep, no problem.
Sorry to get all like aggro and negative about it, but that wasn't our intent. But,
I get it. I'm the same. I'm similar.
Yeah.
I'm similar.
No worries. Cool. Well, Jake, then real quick, parting shots. Where can people track you down and learn more about you?
Feel free to Google my name, check out my portfolio, Jake Madoff. You'll see a few articles I've done. My website is jakemadoff.io. If you want to work together and see how we can increase your revenue with growth marketing, just submit that form on jakemadoff.io and we'll see what we can do together.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us.
Me too. This was great. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week, and we'll see you guys next time.